Hello, everybody. If you did the 28-day, the challenge that I did back in February, we spoke about a thing called pendulums, and it doesn't matter if you didn't do it or not. They're still going to be relevant for you. But that's what I want to make this podcast all about. I really want to talk about pendulums and really how to work with them. And I think it's important now because I would really characterize this time that we're living in as extremely pendulum heavy. So, when I talk about pendulums, what I'm really talking about is this concept. And it's a concept that comes from a Russian philosopher, Vadim Zeland. And it's this concept that when groups of people share the same thoughts and emotions, it creates an energy. And then this energy becomes a separate thought structure and it takes on a life of its own. And it's a pendulum. You could call it a little bit like mob mentality or herd mentality, but it's just what happens when collective thoughts and emotions almost kind of become untethered from their source, take on a life of their own, and really begin to overwhelm us. So, this is really, and the interesting thing about a pendulum too is that it just feeds off your energy. It's not it doesn't want to construct, it doesn't want to destruct, it just wants to feed off your reaction. So it's more than happy to for you to be enthralled by the pendulum, to be obsessed by the pendulum, to be scared of the pendulum, or anxious from the pendulum. A good way to understand pendulums is to really just look at your own life and to look at where you are involved in pendulums in your own life. So, and some of it can be your opinions about the world, some of it can be, how you feel, for example, when you see certain atrocities happening in the world, when you see certain political figures on your TV or on your phone. It can be connected to sports too, it can also just be connected to your belief systems, how you think men should be, how you think women should be. And and ultimately, I'm not saying that any of these things are wrong. I'm not saying that it you shouldn't have an opinion, but let's begin to look at the energy cost of having some of these opinions because the energy cost is vital, especially when we begin to remember that our future is very much based on energy. And all of the work that we're doing in this Patreon group anyway, is just learning to control the energy. And when I say that control the energy, what I'm talking about is your inner feeling, your state dictates reality. If I go around the world with a feeling of guilt, then I will receive punishment. If I travel the world with a strong feeling of shame, then I will encounter failure. If I don't like myself, I will meet people who also treat me badly. So your state determines your reality. And these pendulums are designed in such a way to emotionally activate you. They feed off your emotions. Now, I remember when I was young, I supported Tottenham Hotspur Football Club. And every weekend, I would be involved in a very strong pendulum. And that pendulum would feed off my energy and then would release me at the end of 90 minutes, where I would feel depressed or I would feel elated and excited. Either way, like winning or losing, I wasn't stable and wasn't autonomous. I was being pulled through one thing or the other. So just beginning to recognize yourself, all of the pendulums that you give your attention to. The news cycle is a pendulum. Social media is a pendulum. You will have friends who will try to get you into their pendulums, talking to you about certain things. I remember the first time I ever encountered this energetic hygiene before a friend's partner. The three of us were stood around. I think this must have been 7 years ago. And I started to talk about, I think I started to talk about a war in the Middle East. And she said, "Do you mind if I not talking about that right now? Because I don't want to get pulled into the energy of that." And I remember walking away thinking how rude that was. And then it dawned on me how actually clever of her it was to actually be able to do that and recognize the energetic effect of being brought into these conversations. I was trying to involve them in my pendulum. So there's certain things, even economic anxiety, the cost of living crisis, the markets going up and down, uncertainty. These things, what they're doing is they are connected to collective fear, and they create massive pendulums that then distort your individual perception. Now, there's something interesting. Like I live in Mallorca, for example, and there are many people who a current pendulum that we have in Mallorca is that you cannot find a place with reasonable rent on this island. And while rents are increasing all the time, there are plenty of instances of people finding deals. Personally, I have a deal. I pay very little for my place here. You know, my I have other friends who have deals. So when you kind of give yourself over to the pendulum, it creates a very black and white view of reality. Now, there's comfort from being in the pendulum too, because you go, oh, well, we're all screwed together. It connects you to the herd. We're trying to separate ourselves from pendulums as much as possible because the energetic cost of a pendulum is dramatic. And what we want to do here, and much of this reality creation and reality choice work that we're doing, it's not based on logic. We are really creating magic here. So even when this pendulum can like look so convincing, it can look so there can be factual data to back it up, everything like this. We need to learn that in our individual worlds, magical things happen, magical, illogical things happen that are not dependent upon the structures that other people require. Okay. So, one way to kind of begin to understand pendulums is just to look at how it feels to be in a pendulum. You feel out of control. That's the first thing. You got this situation feels hopeless. In many ways, pendulums are designed to make you feel hopeless. And when you feel hopeless, it's easier to control you. There's often a sense of urgency, like the window is closing, I have to make the decision right now. You might already begin to notice there's a sort of a pendulum about this summer and flights, and will there be jet fuel? Will there won't be jet fuel? If you want to go somewhere and it is aligned and it is the thing for you to do, you will get there. We don't have to worry about these things. We operate from this place of state, and our state determines reality, not what people feel and believe collectively. So, another way that you can begin to kind of notice that you're in a pendulum is you're in arguments. You might even be in arguments with people you've never met. You might be in arguments in your head. You might be in arguments online, like these Twitter wars and so on and so forth, like this. This is just this is just pendulum stuff. Um, you can also feel very righteous with a pendulum. So much of, I mean, when I think of like the language around Israel and Gaza, when I think so much of COVID, when I think of Black Lives Matter, when I think of the Me Too movements, all of these things, there was a huge degree of righteousness that was accompanying them. Now, this isn't me saying that these movements weren't important, but there's also just look at it as you move through these movements on your own individually. At what point did you kind of lose autonomy and then just get in the I guess, in the collective idea? And this I noticed this in particular just happening with, say, um, yeah, with what's been happening in Gaza at the moment, where I was beginning to notice just like this huge anger towards Israelis. And I have some Israelis in my community here and just felt this anger towards them. And it was only when I actually kind of went like, okay, this anger is not isn't mine. It's based on something else. And I approached them and had conversations with them. And I realized, no, these are good people and I love these people and they don't support their government and they don't support what is happening. They don't support death and so on and so forth. So it's in these moments that you can notice that you are caught in a pendulum when your inner dialogue feels borrowed, right? When you begin to have these and you'll notice it in particular when you're in an argument with somebody else and they're repeating things and they almost just sound like they're some pundit from the news. This is pendulum energy, right? And what happens is that your mind begins to spin these stories and then it gets lost in them. So what we need to learn to do here is to step off. Now, this doesn't mean that we become completely disengaged with reality. It doesn't mean that we bypass, but we need to detach at an emotional level. Because when we are attached at an emotional level, we are just adding more and more fuel to the pendulum. Something that we also need to learn these days is that there aren't really black and white anymore. We have to really be more comfortable with paradox. We are going to be in a time where things that we thought were true are no longer true. People who we thought were bad might actually have been good, or were a mixture of all of these things. And the less you can engage in fighting and having these strong opinions, the easier it becomes to just see the wood for the trees. It doesn't mean that you don't care about the world, and it doesn't mean that you don't take action. This is really important, but it just means that your action comes from clarity. It comes from choice. Yeah, it can be very, very easy to get very angry and get very emotional about geopolitical events. And when you are emotional and angry about geopolitical events, you might completely miss out on the fact that your best friend needs your support right now. And this is what I'm talking about because we lose our clarity when we get caught up in a pendulum. Um, and and a good way to just sort of work with this is to simply just ask yourself the question: Is this my thought? Is this actually coming from me, or is this the pendulum? Um, so okay, I'm back. I just had to get a glass of water. Um, and another element of pendulums that can be really useful to look at is your own interpersonal relationship pendulums. So if you notice a recurring dynamic, this might be with a family member, um, you could have like these, like the holiday dinner, the inherited roles, old wounds, how you behave sort of unconsciously. These are all pendulums. If you go to your family and you kind of bemoan the fact that, oh, I'm always the responsible one. I'm always or I'm the peacemaker, or I'm the problematic one. These are pendulums. Um, and what they're doing, you'll notice, is they just create drama. They suck from your energy. The it it's a little bit like they blindside you without giving you any chance. Like you notice how like the pendulum in a way like just removes your autonomy because you walk into a room You encounter a person, you're informed by their face, you read things on their face, and immediately the pendulum swings and you've lost all self control and you're in a dream. It really is a kind of the pendulum is a form of illusion, right? And it happens when you start to react predictably and then it provokes another predictable response. And then both of you just feed the swing. You feed the swing. Um, there's this very interesting thing in behavioral psychology called the drama triangle, and it's a pendulum structure that tends to just repeat in relationships where people rotate through different roles: the victim, the persecutor, or the rescuer, and and it just keeps feeding itself. Someone's the victim, the other person's the persecutor, then someone's the rescuer, then someone's the victim, and it goes on and goes on. Um, and all that really seems to happen is that your energy just slowly gets siphoned off. It's like a forest fire, really. Um, and then you also recruit people. I think it can be very, very useful to not complain about people, especially your partners. Because what this does is it's you trying to like recruit the pendulum. You're trying to recruit more people to feed your pendulum. You're, these grievances. Oh, this is hurting. This is upsetting me. It can be useful to share, but when you are just sharing about a repeated pattern all the time and you're not doing the work of stepping out of the pattern, all you're doing is just pushing the pendulum further. You could call it a swing too. Maybe a swing would be a more useful word. But so coming back to some of the energetic work and how we can begin to understand this. If the world reflects your inner state back to you, and nowhere is this more visible than in your close relationships. So if you're running a pendulum, if there's a pendulum that's running internally in you, a fear, a wound, a story, you're going to attract people and situations that confirm it. So stepping out of the pendulum just means shifting the inner narrative before the relationship. So when you notice, oh, this familiar thing, this is going to happen, I'm going to have to deal with this again, you sort of you catch yourself and you step out and you break the swing of the drama. um, and this only works for you. You cannot force other people off their pendulums, but if you can get into this simple habit of just stop playing your role, introduce a pause, respond differently. Instead of, I sometimes notice this, like in my relationship, I have a big wound around fairness, right? And so sometimes I will do kind of what I call fairness accountancy in my head. I'll be, oh, I made dinner 3 times, she made dinner once, blah, blah, blah. And the minute I begin to notice that pendulum, I'll make dinner again instead. Instead of me trying to Uh, when I notice that I've fallen into the role of I'm complaining because I'm making dinner too much, rather than feed that, I'll just go, no, I'm going to joyfully make dinner again. And what that does is it stops the pendulum. So it stops the tension in me. I voluntarily do the thing. Now, of course, this isn't me giving advice to people who are in very unbalanced relationships, but it's a way of, or people who are in relationships where they're just simply not getting their needs met. But it's this idea that if you react to the pendulum, you will feed it. So the one thing to do is to do what the pendulum doesn't expect. So that could be you stop complaining. It could be you act more generously. It could be you just step out, you take space. Whatever it is, you just have to break the swing of the drama. Well, that's the important thing, right? Um, Ultimately, there will always be pendulums as long as there are people. Um, and the problem with the pendulum is it takes you away from your root. Like you can care deeply about the world and you can care deeply about the people around you, but you can also refuse to be a pendulum's fuel sources. You know, you can also refuse to just go there with people. And maybe on occasion, this one might be difficult with some people. Some people will want you to join in their outrage, and that's okay. You might just have to deal with the blowback from that. But ultimately, like what emerges from this is if you can avoid pendulums, avoid repeating strat stories, what you get in return is you get your stability, you get your clarity, and you get your peace. And that just leaves you in a much better position. If you are in clarity, if you are in peace, and if you are in stability, then the world will reflect this back to you. And that's deeply beautiful. Okay. Thanks for listening. And if you've questions about this, because I understand it can be a strange topic, I also understand that um, this might be a topic that other people deeply disagree with. There might even be a pendulum involved in that. So just let me know. All right. Bye bye. Thank you.